So we're in a large discussion this morning about national teams, and I want to bring in this guy to talk about national teams. Cap, what's the word?
Morning, John.
Yes, it is morning. I will grant you that.
Yes, sir. Everything's good on my end. How about yourself?
Oh, trying to look the part. So as I sit here and filibuster and let everybody know that you're hanging out with me.
Yes.
We had an announcement yesterday. Was it yesterday? Was it yesterday? 2 days ago?
Yeah, 2 days ago.
Okay, I mean, because it's all just blends together. What's it like when you get tapped on the shoulder for any competition? I know for you it was 2 gold cups, and you were on a preliminary roster. I think it was for 14.
Yeah.
What's it like to get tapped on the shoulder to sit there and say, "Hey, I want you to represent your country"? What's that moment like?
Man, there's not many better feelings for a soccer player, I wouldn't think. It's a relief, a big relief, because obviously it's not an unexpected call that you're receiving. You know that you're going to be getting a call or an email or something, and that you've got a good chance of making it. So it's a huge relief, and it just validates, I guess, all the hard work that you've done to get to where you are. Right, all the grind that we talk about, and the sacrifice. Right, of course you bear those fruits with your club team and doing well with them, for sure. But any player's ultimate goal is to represent their national team, and then to do that at the biggest stages.
So when you look at where the United States has come from, both on the men's and women's side, what's it been like for you to see the growth of the game to where it is and your place in it as a professional footballer and someone who's represented your country, and now someone who gets to influence those next generations? What's it been like for you to see the game grow here in the U.S., to see U.S.'s place in it?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I mean, I think people don't realize how far we've come as a country in such short little time. When I turned pro in 2005, there were no MLS academies. That didn't exist. Right, the only pathway was basically going to college, or if you could turn pro straight from high school, which was very rare at that time. So the ample opportunities that are out there now, especially with USL growing, so many opportunities for players, which is awesome, on the men's and the women's side, which wasn't there even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I know people want us to compete for World Cups titles and, be there at the very top, but soccer in this country is still so young compared to these, European, African, Asian countries that have been doing it for decades. We're still in catch-up mode. And yes, we've got every advantage as far as athletic people, every resource possible out there, facilities. So yes, we will catch up at some point quickly. We already are, with MLS being definitely a top 7 league in the world. So it's been incredible to see, honestly. I'm fortunate to be a part of it.
When you get to kind of see what's been going on and you're having conversations now, I know that giving advice earlier in your career to younger folks, the message might be different now than it was that previous generation. How has giving advice to younger soccer players changed, or has it, with the growth of the game here in the United States? Has the messaging been different? What's the levels of acceptance, all those kinds of things? How has mentoring even changed in that time frame where the game has grown to where it is?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume it's changed. I mean, I didn't really have a per se mentor when I was younger, and Greg and I have only been doing this for a little over a year. But I would assume the conversations are a lot different, because kids these days at 10, 11, 12 are in such a different position than I was, and most of my generation was at that age, as far as they're so far ahead of where we were. They've got such better coaching. They're watching their games on video. There's so many opportunities for them to play year round if they want. And so the level is different. And they've also got aspirations. When I was 10 years old, there was no MLS. I was looking at like, man, if I want to play pro, then I'm gonna have to go to Europe and, shoot, maybe I'd rather play baseball, type thing. Where it's like, now, these guys, some of them are training at the same facility as professional soccer players, right? It's just so different to have that type of motivation right in front of you, and idols that you can, look up to and try and emulate your game around, including soccer on TV, right? I'm sure when you were growing up, there was barely any soccer on
black
TV.
and white television, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, even when I was growing up, you get a Champions League game every now and then,
Yeah.
right? But other than that, you weren't seeing much soccer on TV, and that's a huge learning tool. So yeah, I think the conversations are much different because these athletes they're just at a different level earlier on, and so they understand different aspects, and you can get into greater depth about the sacrifices and what you need to do. And I preface that with saying, like, hey, the younger the age, for sure, the more we try and tell kids, hey, be a kid, play other sports, do other things, have other hobbies as well.
But how difficult is that, though? Because of how things are today, whether it's parental expectations or self-expectations and how kids are, how difficult is it for a kid to be a kid, considering aspirations and goals and things like that?
Very, very difficult. I know it from firsthand experience because my son, when we were in Atlanta, played NASA soccer for their I don't know, U8, U9 academy team, right? So it's just a step up from rec league. But he also played baseball, and baseball was, I call it rec, but rec at East Cobb baseball is not rec, right? It's definitely way more intense than rec. But he and we had a very difficult time juggling both sports, and he was 8 years old, right? At a time when he should be playing multiple sports for sure. And having that opportunity, it was difficult for us, right? We were running from one to the other sometimes. We had to make decisions of, which one don't we go to this time? And coaches, some of them try to say, hey, yeah, we encourage you guys to play sports, but then they're not too happy when you don't show up for a game or you don't show up for a practice. And that's the reality of it. And that's at 8 and 9. So yeah, it's even tougher at 10, at 11, right? To play these other sports and get these different experiences. So, I encourage it, but I totally understand as a parent that it's really, really difficult and costly.
And since you get to see it both ways, I mean, I think that both as a parent and as a mentor, you get to see how difficult it is. I mean, then as someone who, I don't have kids like you. I have parents and pets. That's what I have when it comes to overseeing things. But when it comes to that kind of messaging, it's like, be a kid, be a kid, be a kid. When I was a kid, since we didn't have all of that other sensory stuff around us, I imagine it was probably a little easier than, having to do cutthroat things and having disappointment thrown at you from other adults for things that are out of your control. I mean, it just seems generationally, if I could get my upper plate to work this morning, that pressures on younger players and younger athletes and just young people in general. It's something that really, I think that they have to grow up faster these days than they did probably when you were younger, and definitely when I was younger.
Totally. And it's society. We're forcing our kids to grow up faster because, obviously there's totally different ways of parenting, but, the way that we have chosen to parent is to be upfront and honest with our kids. And so, you have some tougher conversations with them when they're at a younger age to prepare them and to protect them in the long run. And that's difficult for sure. But yeah, on the sporting side, absolutely. I always think like you get these, sometimes you athletes that are called practice players, right?
Yeah.
That do really well at practice, and then they get to the games and they struggle or they're nervous or something. And if I had one of those kids, if I was the parent of one of those kids, I'd look at myself in the mirror, because usually at practice, parents are not yelling. They're sometimes not there, right? The kids just get to go out there. They're with the coach, and they're just practicing, having fun, right? But come game time, all the parents are lined up on the sideline. And, are you adding, or are the parents adding pressure and criticism to kids playing? And is that affecting their desire to go out there and their ability to do well when they are out there? So, there's that as well, that kids are dealing with.
Do you ever get to have conversations with peers in an age sense and kind of break it down, where you get to be a mentor and you get to see young athletes want to do what they want to do? Do you ever have to have those hard conversations with parents or adults or those who are in that sphere of that particular athlete if things are kind of being a little too intense? Do you ever have to have those conversations?
Every now and then, and we try and toe a line of, suggesting, and, we're not at these kids' games, so we don't know exactly, but, that's where the group sessions come in handy, because when we do group sessions, we definitely encourage parents to be there. And for sure, some of the messaging goes towards them as well. Because obviously everyone knows it's the worst part about youth sports, right? Everyone knows that, right? Everyone that's been a part of the game, yet it just seems to be concurrent, right? I saw it when I was a kid growing up. There were parents there. When I was at my kids' games in East Cobb, like, it was just ridiculous, right? And most of the time, if you ever see a pro athlete, they're watching their kid, they're going to be the one in the corner.
Yeah.
Like away from all the other parents, just sitting there with a hoodie on, hanging out, being quiet, right? Because they know. Yes, every now and then, I see LeBron James out there, and he's loud and boisterous at his kids' game. But I'd say for the most part, they're off in a corner being quiet, because I think most of us are appreciative of the parents that are like that.
So when a mentee posts on social media, and this is stuff that you guys at BG Mentoring do on your social media accounts. When one of your mentees has a message that is posted on social media about the positive experience that he has with you guys and how it rubs off and how he grows, what's that like for you and for Greg to see those kinds of things come to the fore, to where you have a physical representation of what you're trying to talk about?
Yeah, it feels great. It feels great that the work that we're doing makes a difference, right? They're getting it, they're understanding it, but also that they understand that they needed it, and that's some of it too. Sometimes you get the kids whose parents sign them up, whose parents know that they need it or need something, but the kid doesn't necessarily. And so it's always great to get those messages, and that's. We don't do it for the messages, but we do it for the feeling that the kid gets that, okay, there's progress being made here. I'm being more confident. I'm understanding how to deal with some setbacks or whatever is going on. So yeah, definitely rewarding. It feels good.
Is there one element or issue that you find that you and Greg find the hardest to tackle when it comes to your mentees these days? Or is it just you start off with this universal approach and then you kind of take case by case by case with each? But is there any kind of commonality as to some of the harder things these days?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that dealing with confidence is obviously one that we get a lot. And there's certain things that we try and help with on the mental side, so that you don't lose it, or that you don't lose it too far. lose all of it when you do go through a bad spout, and then certain little things that can help out. But there's some kids that are already in a bad place confidence wise, and so trying to get them out. And a lot of that is getting to know the kid, and what they're going through and their situation and why they're down, because it's not a, hey, do this and you'll be good. It's not a white blanket fixes everything for everyone. So that's the challenge for us sometimes is getting a relationship with the kid so that we can understand how we can help and what message will best serve them, right? Because everyone's different and everyone reacts to things differently. And so, when the blanket approach isn't working, and some of the tools that we try and give aren't getting through to an individual, it's that challenge sometimes, especially some kids who are quiet, getting them to open up and seeing how we can best help them.
Yeah,
and comments on the side, John. I just want to mention that the lollipop is a good idea. I've heard that before. About that was on the sidelines, and the initiative right now is 95% in Atlanta. We want to bring it elsewhere, and it's available elsewhere because we do most of it virtually, anyways. So it's available for anybody. I'm at 10 o'clock, I'm speaking with a kid that's at Yale. And later on, we've got kids that are in New York City, Portland, all over the place. So, it's available everywhere. I'd like to do more up here in Ohio at some point. But we're trying to get our footing on the ground there in Atlanta first.
How different is it to do mentoring digitally versus in person?
I think like everything, you can usually connect a little bit better in person. You can get a better vibe with people, but it's similar to the workforce, right? It's nice to have the option. It's nice to have the availability, and you're able to reach a wider audience that we wouldn't normally. I think that there's some downsides to, where some kids, don't have great internet connection. That can be a struggle. So Greg and I are hopefully with our nonprofit going to help address some of that with kids that we work with that don't have good internet. But I'd say it's mostly better. We can. I'm up here in Ohio, so right. If everything was in person, I wouldn't be connecting with as many kids as I'm able to.
Yeah, when you mention how technology helps in this kind of a thing, I think that over the last couple of seasons and the last couple of years, we've really learned how to be more nimble when it comes to how we want to do things and how we want to make sure that folks know that we can still be engaged. Since you started this, since you and Greg started Beyond Goals, have you had to adjust your thought patterns about how you're addressing things when it comes to your path, whether it's digital versus in person? I guess when you looked at your expectations about how you wanted to give your messaging out from the beginning, has it changed? Has your approach changed since you started, even in this short period of time since it began?
We're definitely growing and adapting and using more tools. We understand sometimes when we're working with some younger athletes that we can, if we just sit there and talk for 30 minutes even, right, you lose the attention span.
Yeah.
So trying to make it a little bit more interactive, show some videos every now and then, us ask them more questions, get them more involved. So those are probably the biggest things we've learned of how to make it a little bit more interactive and less one-sided, us, giving information, because even though it might be good, it means nothing if they've shut off after 7 minutes because they're bored. So that's been the biggest part. And I think that's a little easier when you're in person to grab somebody's attention, right? Than over the computer where, they can look out to their bedroom or wherever they are, or they can, who knows what else is going on the screen that we can't tell, so that's probably been the biggest thing. And that's why Greg and I, particularly in the group sessions, like to be there in person, because at least one of us, because we can grab their attention a little bit better and, call on kids and, like I said, make it more interactive.
All right. So Abby's got another question for you. You working with mostly boys, or is it a mix these days?
It's a mix. It's mostly boys, I would say, but it's a mix. We work with, on the group side, it's far more mixed. Anytime that we go to a high school, we try and talk to the boys and the girls teams, and that's usually the case. Definitely when we go to any after school program, it's a mix of kids. Our individual sessions, I'd say that it's probably 80-20 boys to girls. And, that's one thing that Greg and I have spoken about, that we'd like to expand at some point in the future and bring on either a current or former woman player, because I think that, especially this day and age, like, women can connect with girls better than a man can. I will say that Greg and I try, and when we do videos with girls, we try and find clips from U.S. women's national team's games and make it more relevant to them than watching, men play. Mm-hmm. But that's the reality of it right now, 80-20. And then the groups are definitely 60-40, 50-50.
I'm only going to keep you for another couple of minutes because you mentioned you got the session coming up at 10 o'clock. When it comes to young athletes and just young men and women when you're mentoring, I know that one of the things that when I will talk to an intern who is hanging out in a television station and they're completely intimidated by their surroundings and they see all of this TV stuff going on around them and that they want to learn, but they don't quite know how. And I will always go to an intern and I will say, look, there is no such thing as a wrong question to ask, because I've heard it before. You won't be the last person to ask it. So don't ever be afraid to ask a question. If you think it might be a bad question to ask, don't worry about it. Do you have those same kind of concerns with your mentees when they're almost afraid to ask because they don't want everyone around them to think that it's a question that shouldn't be asked? And it's like, oh, why are you asking that? Do you have those mentees with those concerns?
Yeah, totally. I think that we get it in the individual session because sometimes kids are a little starstruck or, intimidated a little bit talking to an ex-professional. But for sure in the group stage, when you've got that pressure of, is my buddy over there going to give me a hard time for asking a silly question, what they think is a silly question or whatever. So no, we definitely encourage it. Sometimes we tell kids, hey, your homework is to come next session with 3 questions for us. In the group stage, we try and lean on the coach or the leader there to help us call on certain kids that say, hey, ask a question, or we tell them beforehand, think of some questions that you want to ask. Because you're right, it's always better when they're asking questions and we're able to answer things and go from there. Makes it more interactive, like I said, and more helpful, right? I know that they have questions, and you're right. It's just the confidence of being able to ask it.
All right. So what's going on with Beyond Goals? Because I know I have a follow-up after this. What's the latest? What's on the timetable for you and Greg these days?
Tomorrow we have an event with Soccer in the Streets. Their annual gala downtown is tomorrow. So I'm flying down tomorrow for that. So Greg and I will be there. And, I think that the newest thing is Greg and I messing around with YouTube, and we are going to start getting some YouTube clips up of little parts of some of the messaging that we give, so that it's available and it's out there, but then also maybe interview other athletes and ask them some little questions and, small little clips that could be helpful, that can just be out there to reach a bigger audience.
And so then are you flying to Rhode Island for the announcement at the Guild RI, at the Guild RI on the Twitters? So you're going from Soccer in the Streets to Rhode Island for the announcement on Monday, right?
Correct. So, yep, down in Atlanta tomorrow for Soccer in the Streets Saturday, Sunday flying to Rhode Island. the big name and crest reveal Monday and Tuesday up in Rhode Island. So super excited about that. It's been a while coming. Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
All right, and so if you want to break some news before you go, you can.
I might be in a little bit of trouble if I do that.
Look, it's just us, dude. It's just us.
And Abby.
And then it goes to the app and the podcatchers afterward. One last question from Abby. Do you guys work with coaches to help them in how they coach?
That's a great question. And it's something that Greg and I have thought about incorporating it into our, I don't know, business or whatever you want to call it.
Your model, your operating model, I guess.
Exactly. Because we know that coaches have some of the biggest influence over kids, more so than parents and sometimes more so than teachers. So to get them to understand that and to give them tips of seeing kids that are dealing with confidence issues or pressure and how to encourage versus criticize and little things that we learned just from other coaches. And sometimes, especially at the rec level, right? These coaches are just volunteers, dads that got roped into it that have no idea and things like that. But even them at a young age, they've got a big influence. I think I've probably said it on here before, but Arsene Wenger's quote of it's better to have no coach than a bad coach under the age of 12. And yeah, I agree with it because a coach can kill the fun and can kill the confidence of a young player, and then they'll never go back to the game. Which is sad. So we have thought about it, or even partnering with another group to create something. So it's definitely in the pipeline somewhere.
It's better to have no coach than a bad coach.
Something like that. But I'm looking forward to the World Cup as well. We got that starting soon.
Yeah, we do. And we'll talk about that next time you're on. So you got a session. Get out of here.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
You too. Be good. Michael Parkhurst, BG Mentoring. And so he's going to go be a mentor. And great questions, guys. Thanks for doing that this morning.